Hello and welcome to this DV360 custom bidding script builder demo. For the purposes of this demo, we've just made a copy of the external template that is available to anyone who has the link. And so once we've made a copy, we've opened it in a new tab, and here's what happens. So at first, you'll see this pop up. This is requesting, the Google team who built the solution is requesting to have view access to this spreadsheet. The team will be using this data to monitor common errors and then preemptively fix them. Also to collect aggregate usage data, essentially just to justify continued support for the solution, and also for our product team to understand that this is a popular solution, and therefore they will be considering actually building a similar functionality into the UI in the future. You're able to remove this access at any time from the normal user sharing menu. So we do obviously recommend that you say yes, but it's totally up to you, and you can always revoke it at any time. So once you've selected this option, you'll be able to actually dive into the script builder. The first tab that you'll see is actually a user guide. This is full of some really important information. We do have a full user guide that kind of walks you through sample use cases, talks about custom bidding overall. So highly recommend, using the full user guide. But we did put some quick tips within the spreadsheet, some quick activation steps, some reminders, some information on kind of how logical connectors work in case you're not familiar, a quick overview of the different operators, since they are kind of in encoding format or scripting format. So this is what they mean. We also have some additional documentation on how to kind of add your script, how to test your script. And this is actually a sample of what a test would look like. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. I think if you only look at one thing on the user guide, the key thing is this little box here, which shows you all the variables that are available to you in the custom bidding script builder. And then it shows you the corresponding value for that variable. And so for every variable within the current script builder version, there are only two options. They're either a Boolean variable, which means that they correspond with a true or false value, or they're an integer variable, which means that they will require the input of a whole number in order to be a valid input. So for each of these variables, we not only tell you whether or not it's a true false, but if you hover over the value, you can actually see kind of what the criteria are for true false. So for this case, active view viewed, it says this returns true if active view detects that your ad has been viewed. Otherwise, it returns false. So you'll actually be able to see even more information about what those numbers mean. This is really important for things like device type and environment, because you can see that the numerical code, so the device types are actually represented by a numerical code. So 0 means computer, 2 means smartphone, etc. So you'll need to refer to these if you're trying to use some of those variables, because obviously you're not going to know off the top of your head what those numbers mean, but you can refer to them here. Once you've kind of checked out the user guide, you can actually jump into the solution itself. This is where the script builder lives, on this user inputs tab. Just to make it even easier for you to understand and get some idea of how it works, we've also included a couple tabs of sample use cases, which show you what the variables that you would input are and what the output would look like. We have a couple of these in here just to make it easier and give you some ideas for how to build a script. But I will say that, these are actually also active tabs. You can change the variables inputs if you want, and you can use the buttons. They're active tabs. The cool thing about the solution is that actually you can have multiple kind of iterations or multiple instances of the script builder within the spreadsheet. So if you did want to create additional, multiple scripts within the same spreadsheet, you can just go ahead and duplicate this tab, and each of them will kind of run independently of each other. But once you're on the script builder tab that you want to be working in, I want to go through a couple of the different inputs that you'll be using. So jumping down to the main part of it, these are the different conditions that are in your script. So each row essentially represents a condition. And for each condition, at the end of the day, it will kind of evaluate down to either a true or a false for the whole condition. And then based on this, if the condition is true, the weight will be applied. So there are a couple inputs that you'll put up here, the partner ID, the advertiser ID, and then the aggregation method. The aggregation method actually will help the script determine if there are multiple true conditions within a script. How do we treat that? How do we handle that? You can tell it how you want it to handle it. So for example, max aggregate would look at this and say say three of these conditions are true. Condition 1, condition 3, condition 5, they're all true when it evaluates. Well, then the aggregation method will look at this and say if you've had set max aggregate, it will just take the biggest one. So in this case, the impression weight would be 150. If you chose sum aggregate, it would actually add them all together. So it would do 150, 200, 210. That would be the weight that's given to the impression. And then finally, first match aggregate will just literally go in order of these numbers. So it would look at the first one, look at the second one, look at the third one, and it will just apply the weight of the first condition that returns true. So in this case, again, it would just be 150 because our first condition is true. But it doesn't matter if it's the biggest or the smallest, it's just whichever one comes first. So in that case, that's the only aggregation method in which the order matters. But otherwise, for max aggregate and sum aggregate, which are by far the two more popular options, the actual order of the conditions doesn't impact the actual aggregation. So when we're talking about weights, I think there's two important things to understand about the impression weight. So first of all, these are not bid scores, right? These are after after your campaign has served an impression, the script will actually help the model determine, was that a positive impression? Was that did we do a good job, essentially? And the weights will help kind of tell the model if the impression was positive, and if so, how positive, right? So rather than just saying yes or no, it will give you, you get to be a little bit more nuanced. So you can say, hey, this was a really good impression, or yeah, this impression was positive, better than nothing, but it wasn't great. So you can give those, you can give those signals to the model by these weights. And the second important thing to note is the actual number on the weight is not that important. So what I mean is, you can kind of choose a range of numbers that make sense to you. So in this case, we've kind of chosen whole numbers, large numbers, but we have kind of the range of 150 to 0, which is the value that will be assigned if none of these conditions are met. However, some people like to think of it a little differently. Some people like to think of it as almost a percentage where 100% is the best possible impression. So in that case, maybe you'd weight 1 for your gold standard, your most valuable type of impression, and then you'd say, hey, this one's worth about half that, so I'm going to weight it 0.5. Or this is only kind of a 10% valuable impression, so maybe 0.1. So you could kind of use whatever weights you want, as long as they're kind of the thing that's important is the relativity to each other, and also the relativity to 0, because obviously if if none of the conditions are met, the impressions will be weighted 0. So once you kind of think about the weight that you assigned, you'll also have to obviously choose the condition. What is actually deciding if that weight is applied to the impression? So at that point, you're looking at, again, you'll have to choose a variable. So we have all of these to choose from. And once you've chosen the variable, you'll choose the corresponding operator. So is it equal to, is it not equal to, etc. And then in this case, this is a Boolean one, so is it true or false? So how to read this, click equals true, just means did someone click on the ad? If they did, this clause evaluates to true. Now, in some cases, you might just have a single clause for your condition, in which case, if it evaluates to true, then the weight will be applied. Obviously, assuming that the aggregation method chooses this condition. However, in some cases, you might have multiple things that you want to chain together to kind of create a condition. If you have more than one, you're going to want to apply a logical connector, and you can use either and or. And then you select a second clause kind of that will also evaluate to true or false. So in this case, the question is, did the device type equal to? As we saw earlier, 2 is smartphone. So we're saying, hey, did this person click and were they on a mobile phone? Because we chose and, both of those things have to be true for this entire condition to evaluate to true. If we chose or, only one of them has to be true for it to be a true condition. And again, the only time the weight is applied is if the whole condition evaluates to true. So in this case, if one of them is true but the other is false, because we chose and, that would mean that the entire condition evaluates to false, and therefore the weight would be skipped, and we'd kind of keep moving on to try and find another true condition. And as you can see, we have a variety of conditions in this example. This one has completed in view audible. We also have time on screen is greater than 10 seconds. Was the ad actually viewed? So maybe those two together, that's weighted about 50. Similarly, if the ad is pretty large on the screen, maybe that's something that we want to, indicate to the model that that's a positive signal. So if the width is over 300 or the height is over 300, maybe then we'll weight it at 50. And finally, this isn't great, it's maybe not our top gold standard, but if it's viewed at all, we do still want to, tell the model that that's a positive signal. And so this would be our final script. So once you're happy with everything that you've input, there are two buttons that you can select from the UI. As a note, when you first select a button, you will need to authorize the scripts. So it will come in a separate pop-up, and it will just ask you to authorize the scripts that kind of power this solution in the backend. So you're not able to see this because I think it's in a separate tab, but essentially you'll just go through, choose your account, choose the allow button, and then you'll go ahead and be able to use the button. So you will probably have to click the button again a second time once you've authorized. And then once you do that, you'll see this is the QA kind of screen. I know it's still a little bit messy and not clear, but it's a little bit easier to read than the final script. So it just shows you what are the inputs that you've included in kind of the user input box, and then also what are the actual conditions that you've come up with. They're a little bit tough to read, but it is just kind of a good way to look at them and see, does something look wrong? Is one of these weights missing, for example? Does one of these conditions kind of just trail off or something? Just good, always good to kind of take a look at this and see if there's anything that kind of pings you as maybe not being correct. We do have a lot of error handling built into the spreadsheet, so if you do kind of leave off a connector or something else, it should give you an error message, but just in case, we want to make sure that, we want to give you the option to kind of look at it yourself. But the most important button for sure is this final script to copy button. Once you've QA'd it, once it looks good, you go ahead and press this button, and almost immediately this pop-up will appear, and it will show you the final script. This script is ready to be used within the custom bidding UI in DV360. And so you can go ahead and literally copy and paste this entire thing into the UI, and you'll have a custom bidding script that's ready to go. I will say we do have some great tools within the UI to double check that everything within your script is correct. So there's a button once you've kind of copied and pasted it in that will allow you to check the syntax. Again, we've built in a lot of safeguards, but it's always best practice to check that syntax. And then there's a button that essentially you can test your script, where it will run your script against essentially a modeled 10,000 impressions. And it will show you how many impressions are actually falling into each of the buckets that you've created here. This is a really, really valuable tool, and I highly recommend that everybody test their script before setting it live, because this will, again, while we've built in some safeguards, there's nothing to stop, you from accidentally building a script that you think is doing one thing, but it's not quite set up the way you want it. So that test button will really allow you to look at the impressions, make sure that the distribution looks like what you are expecting. If hardly any of your impressions are giving a positive score, maybe you need to add some additional conditions so that the model has enough to kind of really optimize towards. So highly recommend using that functionality, and it's within the UI once you've copied and pasted this script. But yeah, this script is ready to go, and you're good to go. We do have some additional functionality to make your life easier. So when you are ready to go copy it into the UI, you can actually open a new tab, a DV360 tab, straight to the partner and advertiser custom bidding pages. So this is just a handy feature, so you're welcome to use that. And then finally, we do have an option to send feedback to the team who built the solution. This will allow you to essentially go through a little form within the spreadsheet and not have to go to your own email. But also you can go ahead and send us a direct email as well. Our email address is at the top of the user guide right here. And that test result, a sample test result of, that I was talking about, that's what this will look like. It will show you essentially, these are the different scores that you've kind of selected the different conditions, and it will show you how many impressions fall into each of the bucket. And it will also tell you if there's any execution errors where there are some impressions that aren't receiving a score at all. We recommend that you do have a certain amount of positive impressions, at least I would say 10% or more. So taking a look at this and making sure that you are having enough positive impressions for the model to learn off of is really important. And that's our demo. Again, if you have any questions or any feedback, please refer to the full user guide first to see if we've kind of already discussed that and then, or covered that. And then if you still have questions, please feel free to reach out to our alias here at Custom Bidding Script Builder at google.com, or using the feedback tool within the spreadsheet. Thank you and have a good day.